I've been practicing medicine for over 25 years, and I've seen it. The world is hurting, people are sick, and even with our greatest scientific discoveries and technological breakthroughs, trends in health are not getting better. We weren't designed for this. This world as we know it, it's not our home. But there is a remedy. Our Creator designed us to be resilient creatures, and He's giving us clues in the scriptures that have dramatic implication for our lives today. Let's talk about biblical prescriptions. Let's take a serious look at living as God intended. Are you ready? Let's get well, and let's go home.
Welcome to another edition of the Biblical Prescriptions for Life podcast. I'm your host, Nick Evanson, here with Dr. James Marcum, author of the 7-week Bible study program, Biblical Prescriptions for Life. And on today's program, Dr. Marcum is going to share with us about the risks of anemia, the causes, and also what we can do about it. Dr. Marcum, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Nick. And I like to talk about specific medical issues because sometimes, these words are tossed around in a hospital or doctor's office, and people don't really understand them. And I want to give a sort of a basic understanding to everyone out there that might be watching. And also, if you go to, these big sources on the internet, sometimes there's too many words.
There's a lot to filter through.
What are the basics? What is it? What's going on with this? So with that, let's talk about anemia. And I want to sort of quiz you about what you know about anemia so I know where to start. Do you know what anemia is? Because I know that that's not, healthcare is not necessarily your background.
That's right.
You're learning a lot.
Not my wheelhouse, but I learn a little every day.
So do you know what anemia is?
So I studied up on it a little bit today.
Then you know.
And what I recall is it's a lack of red blood cells. Is that correct?
That is really correct.
So let's talk about what's in your blood real quick, because that's something that also I didn't know. So there's red blood cells, and there's white blood cells, which I know are helpful for fighting infections. And then there's hemoglobin, which is responsible for providing the capacity to transfer oxygen and CO2.
Heme is iron, okay?
Right.
And it's the red blood cells move around in the body, and they carry oxygen to your cells. So when you breathe in, you get oxygen from your lungs, it gets into the blood, and it goes to every cell in the body.
Right.
So if you don't have a lot of hemoglobin or red blood cells, you become anemic, okay? If you get anemic, your cells can't get oxygen to the body. This also doesn't, all this is messed up. And we hear this word anemia. And so that's what it is. You can't get oxygen to your body. Your cells don't have energy. How would a person feel with that?
Yeah, what are the symptoms?
It's going to affect every part of your body. One of the most common ones we see is fatigue. Okay. They might get pale. You might pinch yourself and say, man, this person's pale. We look at people's nail beds sometimes. See how pink it is? Some people that have anemia, it's not pink.
Because blue?
Right, they don't have that. We look at their membranes. Their membranes might not be pink. It might be sort of whitish because there's not blood flowing through the body. They might look pale.
Right.
You look pale. Well, one of the causes of looking pale is anemia. A person might have very low energy because they don't have enough oxygen getting to their cells as well. Another common symptom is they're short of breath because you don't get oxygen to everyone. So, man, I can't breathe good. But anyway, anemia really makes every organ work harder. Let's say you have an 80 or 90% blockage in the body and you're compensating pretty well, but you become anemic, then you can't compensate, then you might have more chest pain and angina. It might lead to symptoms of heart failure. So anemia affects everything in the body. When someone comes in with just global, I don't feel good, I'm fatigued, I'm short of breath, we think of oxygen, affects every cell in the body. Blood sugar affects every cell in the body. Some of the big ticket items, thyroid hormones affect every cell in the body. So when people have everything wrong, those are some of the things we screen for. And a lot of people do have anemia. They don't make enough blood cells in their body. And we talked about the other things. We talked about the white blood cell counts. Well, the bone marrow is predominantly what makes these cells. The kidneys kick in with this, and also the nutrients you eat. You need iron, B12, folic acid. Many people have heard of iron deficiency anemia. You don't have enough iron, you can't, make the cells. B12 is needed, folic acid is needed. All these are substances that are needed to make enough blood cells to flow through your body. So some people get anemic because of deficiencies. Some people get anemic because they're losing blood. Okay, they might be bleeding somewhere. And one of the most common causes for us to lose little bits of blood at a time is the GI tract.
Okay, right.
And some people might look at their bowel movements and noticing that they're black. Well, that's a sign that you're losing, heme comes out black,
Okay,
and it comes out black in the stool that you might be losing blood. So the first thing anyone asks is, what color's your bowel movements? If you say it's black and you feel poorly, the first thing I'm thinking about, this person's anemic. They might be bleeding from their bowel. We need to find out what's causing the bleeding, even if it's just a trickle. Is it a polyp? Is it something more serious like a cancer? Is it an ulcer? Why are they bleeding? Of course, we all know about acute bleeding, that you can see.
Right.
That's pretty obvious if you're, have a sword in you and you're bleeding out. That's very quickly. But most of the bleeding that we see that causes anemic is something that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it's just a trickle, would it take years?
Well, it could. If you're losing a small amount, it could take depending on how fast you're losing it. One of the things that I do is I put a lot of people on blood thinners sometimes. And a little bit of bleeding becomes a lot of bleeding on a blood thinner.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many cases of cancer we've detected because of the blood thinners. Because they might be losing a trickle from a small cancer, okay?
Yeah.
But then when on the blood thinner, they lose a lot. And then we say, wow, they're losing a lot of blood. They're anemic. Their stools are black. And we do a colonoscopy and we say, oh, they got a cancer. And sometimes we can find it at an early stage and resect it and help them quite a bit.
Yeah.
So those are some causes of, you're not having the cells, the nutrients that you need to make them. You're losing it. Sometimes the bone marrow doesn't make it. Okay. There can be diseases of the bones, like usually the cancer types of illnesses, like multiple myeloma can cause anemia. Myelodysplasia can cause anemia. Different types of leukemia can affect the blood cell counts. Different medicines that hurt the bone marrow, like chemotherapy, can actually hurt the bone marrow so the cells don't make it. Certain diseases that hurt the kidneys make a chemical called erythropoietin, which helps make red blood cells. That can be diminished. Certain chronic diseases that people have, terrible infections, they're sick all the time, that sort of causes the bone marrow and parts of the body not to produce as much. So there can be many causes. So when a person comes in with fatigue and tiredness and short of breath and maybe looking pale, we say, well, let's check the blood count, and we can easily check on the blood count and see if they're anemic. We look at the count, and if it's 13 or 14 on the hemoglobin, heme, iron, globin. If it's really good like that, we say, well, if you're anemic, it's not a big problem. And then we say, well, while it is low, and then we say, well, then the next thing is, well, why is it low? Are you B12, iron deficient? Is the bone marrow not working? Is the kidneys not working? Have you taken a toxin in? You might be losing a little blood. Sometimes the blood counts are so low that until we don't have time to wait to find out why. We said, we got to boost the blood counts right now because there's a big problem here. They might be in heart failure. They might not be breathing well. They might be having a symptom. In that case, we can give a blood transfusion. Okay. Yeah. And a blood transfusion will help a person get better. I saw a patient the other day that had a condition called hemolytic anemia. And in this case, there was something the body was doing, it was making a response to something in the environment that was actually having the immune system destroy blood cells, and it's dangerous because they get anemic because of the body attacking itself. Yeah. And one of the patients I saw had the body attacking one of the lines of the blood called the platelets. And the platelets got very, very low, so low that they would be spontaneously bleeding. It affected me a great deal because as a cardiologist, we like to give a lot of blood thinners. Well, you can't give a lot of blood thinners safely to someone that's anemic or someone that has low platelets, things of that nature. Yeah. You have to really get to the bottom of that. And the specialist that specializes in these anemias are usually called blood hematologist. So they specialize in that. They also need the services of GI doctors to look to see if there's bleeding inside the organs. So they often have them help them find out the causes of anemia. Internists are the ones that sort of usually begin the evaluation of anemia. But anemia is fairly common in our society now. And I'll tell you, a lot of times, Nick, it's because people just aren't eating a good diet.
Really?
with iron, folic acid, B12. Sometimes the gut gets messed up and can't absorb the nutrients that we need. So anemia can be caused by a host of causes. It can be evaluated in many different ways. But if you're feeling tired, run down, unusually short of breath, feeling pale, those type of symptoms, your doctor will usually check your blood, and he'll get a good feel for your blood counts. Now, in the old days, let me see your hand. I would just look here and see, we call that capillary refill. See how well you fill up with blood there? You can press it, and it fills up with blood real quick, and it doesn't stay pale.
Right. Yeah.
Well, if I did this and it didn't do that, you might say, well, man, you're very pale. I don't feel good. You look anemic.
Right, yeah.
So I'd verify that with the blood test, and then I'd ask a bunch of questions. How's your diet? Do you have any other diseases? Are you losing blood? Have you had an accident recently? Are you on any new medicines that might stimulate an immune reaction? Have you had anything new placed in your body? Sometimes heart valves and things foreign could trigger the immune system. So anemia is a word that we don't need to be scared of. The basics are, for whatever reason, you're not making enough blood cells that carry oxygen to the body. This is not good. Once you have it, you need to find out why. And your doctor can do some tests and figure out why. And if you can understand the reason why, you don't have to live with it, hopefully forever.
Yeah. Now, you started to give us some practical stuff there. I don't want to go back just a second. Let's say we have some folks at home that maybe feel fatigued a lot. They're just kind of tired. And maybe they think, well, maybe they're getting a little bit older and they're just losing their energy. How do you know when to go get it checked at the doctor's office?
That's a good question. One of the things is if you're having shortness of breath, that's usually pretty significant. So that's one thing. Sometimes if you get up real quick and you get dizziness, that could be a sign that you have less volume in your blood to pump to your head. That could be a sign of anemic. If your heart rate is unusually fast, see, it's trying to compensate for low blood counts. And Nick, that's one of the ways I can tell how sick someone is almost immediately, is when they come into the office, they say, man, I don't feel good. I'm short of breath or whatever. I want to check their heartbeat, because when you're sick, the body tries to compensate. It makes adrenaline. It tries to get more blood around. You're going to get a tachycardia. If you're sick with an infection, your heart's going to go fast. When my kids were little, and I wanted to know whether are they little sick or big sick, and they have a fever or whatever, well, I take their pulse. And if their pulse was running 150, 160, they're pretty sick.
Yeah.
My wife had
just resting, you're saying, right?
My wife had pneumonia once. This was about 10, 11 years ago. And at first she was a little bit sick and bronchitis. And you know how husbands are. I don't pay attention too much. I checked her heart rate was in the 80s. I'm not too worried about her.
Right.
About 2 days later, she's still coughing up stuff, really not looking very good, sort of looking very pale. I check her heart rate is in 120, 130. And I said, Sonia, you're pretty sick. You need to see somebody. So I get her to go in the emergency room, big pneumonia. Okay, she was septic. Her body was going fast to try to compensate.
Right.
So that's a good, helpful thing. If you're feeling short of breath, if you're getting dizzy when you get up and your heart's getting fast, that's pretty serious. That needs help right away. Those are things you need to look into. Now, if you're just a little bit tired and those things aren't happening, maybe it could wait a little while, because some of the most common causes of fatigue is something that's pretty simple, just not drinking enough water. That's the number one cause of daytime fatigue in America. Another cause of fatigue might be just not getting enough rest. That could be, those are fairly simple things.
Yeah.
But if it's something beyond that, you want to see your doctor, get a complete physical, and usually he can ask you some questions, examine you, just look at you and tell, after doing this for nearly 30 years, Nick, I can just look at someone and say whether they're acutely ill or chronically ill.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
'cause I can look at you right now and I say, listen, this guy's not sick. You might not feel well,
Right.
but I don't
Yeah.
have to get all the answers right now because you look pretty healthy. You know, you look like your heart's not going fast. Your color's pretty good, you know, those type of things. And that's why sometimes it takes an experienced provider to evaluate you, because sometimes you just don't know yourself. You can feel pretty bad and not be very sick. And likewise, you can not feel bad at all and be pretty sick.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So if you're ever in doubt, see your doctor, go to the emergency room, get some help. And like I said, you can go to our website. I'd be happy to help steer people in the right direction.
Yeah. And if you have a question on that, you can go to biblicalprescriptions.com/podcast and then scroll down. I think it's at the bottom of the page, and you can submit your question there, and we'll get back to you on another podcast. I want to talk about one more thing here.
Yeah.
You mentioned deficiencies, B12, iron, and
Folic acid. Another one.
Are there any particular nutrition plans or diets that tend to run low on these things?
Well, it could. And the people that tend to there's some inherited forms of anemia where they don't absorb it well. They're missing a chemical called intrinsic factor. And those people usually have to take B12 in. They can get it in B12 deficiency. That's needed for the blood cells. And they can either get it through the nose or they can inject it. Some people that eat a real strict vegan diet, can run low on, some of the B vitamins as well. They might need replacements. So the B vitamins, of course, folic acid comes in green foods. You get plenty of iron in green foods, and most people can absorb it well. So that's usually not a big issue. But some people just eat processed food all the time. And people that eat processed foods and don't eat much at all might not get enough iron.
Okay.
And sometimes you can be iron deficiency anemia.
So those folks need to eat their broccoli, huh?
They need to eat their greens. They need to eat things that have iron in them. But it's a lot more rare now than it used to be. So most people, now some of the elderly, once they get old, they don't keep up with their nutrition. Sometimes we see them, they run iron deficiency anemia. Some people that are chronically bleeding, Nick, lose iron through their blood loss. So you can lose iron, and then that makes it's a sort of a double whammy. Not only are you losing it, but you're losing iron, so your iron stores are low, so you don't have enough iron in the body to make more blood cells. So sort of a double whammy on losing blood cells. So anemia is very common. It's a very common cause of illness, but it's something that modern medicine can identify and do something about, and there's lots of different options. I guess the anemia that scares me the most are the two types of anemia. One is the one that's caused by medications, especially chemotherapy, hurts the bone marrow, and different types of cancer that attack the bone marrow. Sometimes a person will come in anemic and we'll say, wow, you're anemic. Yeah, I felt bad. I don't feel good. We'll check their bowel movements. They're not losing blood. They're not having any deficiencies. They're not any toxins that would make me think they're having the body attack itself. And we'll say, there must be something wrong with the bone marrow. And then we look into the bone marrow and find a cancer. We might find a cancer called lymphoma. We might find a cancer called multiple myeloma. We might find another type of cancer that's in there. So anemia can be a signal that a person has cancer, usually affecting the bone marrow. Sometimes a cancer can be widespread and just cause illness all over, and the bone marrow just sort of turns itself off. Some people that have chronic kidney disease, we frequently see them anemic because they don't make that chemical called erythropoietin, which helps stimulate the production of red blood cells. So there's lots of different factors, but a good doctor is going to be able to sort of weed you through those one step at a time and give you the information that you don't have to be nervous about it and scared. Because I remember this text in 2 Timothy, it says, God did not create a spirit of fear.
Right.
We don't, as long as we're walking with God, we don't want to be fearful. We don't want to not be concerned about things, but we don't have to be fearful. God's asked him to take you to the people that will give you some answers to help you out. And that's what we try to do at HeartWise and through Biblical Prescriptions for Life. We want to give people some answers, a place to go, to let them know that there's hope. And there's also medical care available. We can help steer them in a direction. We might say, you need to see your doctor now. Here's an article that might help you if it's about nutrition. Here's some websites that are reliable that you can depend on. We like to give people good information, but the most important information I like to give, and the more I do this, is I was in the office today, And a lady came to me and she says, Dr. Marcum, I've been diagnosed with colon cancer. She had breast cancer, but she had now colon cancer, and it really spread throughout her body. And she was undergoing chemotherapy. And she had some heart issues in the past. And I was able to sit down and say, listen, you know, when you're in the presence of Christ, okay, that is healing. And, you know, and you think about the New Testament, all the miracles and all the healings, even the people that were raised from the dead, Nick, they eventually passed away.
Yeah.
And several times Christ had the opportunity to heal everyone. He says, no, I got to go somewhere else and preach the gospel. So healing was really the gospel message, you know, and that's coming into the presence of Christ. And when you walk with him every day, you're healed. It's just where, when, and how. And sometimes God uses illness to get our attention so we get closer to him. And I would rather be ill and sick and come close to him and have that relationship and permanent healing rather than to not know him and be perfect or think we're perfect.
Right.
So in everything, in all the trials, whether they're health trials or mental trials or everything we come to, I was telling her, you know, as long as you stay with Christ, he's going to help you through this. He's going to help you lead about the treatments you need to give, both the short term, and then you can have peace that no matter what happens, you're safe in that relationship. So I was able to talk to her, you know, I could see it gave her a peace that she knew this, but she needed to hear it.
Yeah.
You know, she just needed that reinforcement that there's something more than this life. You know, Christ, God sees the big picture that sometimes we cannot see. You know, we can't see the beginning from the end. We have not always been. We don't know everything. In fact, we know very little about the body. We know very little about all these things. And that's why we have to have a Savior. That's why we have to have a friend that knows much more than us, that can open our mind, that can give us this peace, that can give us an eternal perspective on healing.
That's right. That's right. Anything else we need to know about anemia?
No, I sort of got off on my soapbox there, off the anemia. But this lady is going to have some challenges. And you might have some health challenges out there. But focus on the big picture.
That's right.
You know, and the big picture is start with your relationship with Christ. Know that he will take care of you. You can depend on him. He loves you. He wants to be here with you. He wants to save you. He wants to be part of your life. He wants you to help find the answer. And life's not always going to be easy. There's always going to be ups and downs. And it's not so much the challenges that we have, it's how we handle those challenges. Mm-hmm. And for some people, you know, it's health challenges. For some people, it's relationships challenges. Some people might have a challenge of losing something that's valuable to them, like a bicycle. For some people, it might be having other issues. You know, I know some people that are very close to their pets, and when their pets are sick, they don't feel well. The children. So there's all sorts of challenges, but we have a friend who wants to be part of every relationship every problem that we have. He wants to help us.
That's right.
Because in helping us, even if it's not always what we want, he knows what's best, and we can depend on him. So if you have anemia, of course, get help for that, but also plug into your master designer and ask him to be part of the help in finding the solution and dealing with the health issues that you might have.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing.
My problem.
You know, anemia is something that I don't think about a whole lot, but I really appreciate the education as well as this perspective you give us on the big picture there.
Yeah, big picture. Very important.
Well, hey, folks, we want you to enjoy the podcast again next week. We're going to be back with another episode of the Biblical Prescriptions for Life podcast, but also stay in touch with us via our newsletter. Go to biblicalprescriptions.com/podcast, and you can sign up for our newsletter there and become part of our email list, and we'll give you a monthly newsletter to give you more information about what's going on with Biblical Prescriptions and how you can further improve your health and your relationship with God. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk with you next week about getting well and going home.